Well, if they fight together, they might as well be reviewed together. Here's your look at the Jakks Pacific The Simpsons 2.5-inch Itchy and Scratchy. Collect your favorite cartoon characters from the Simpsons TV series with the Wave 2 of the Simpsons 2.5-inch scale figures featuring basic articulation. These iconic characters from the Simpsons are sure to please cartoon lovers and collectors alike. While they may not be the easiest to break up in the cartoon, Jakks apparently felt it was super easy to break them up and sell them separately. Before we get a closer look though in the 2.5-inch scale Itchy and Scratchy, let's take the tape measure and we'll have a look at how tall the figures actually stand. And then of course I'll bring in a couple of 5-inch scale figures so you guys can see the differences there. This might be the only time I'm going to invest any more in getting the 2.5-inch scale, just because again I can feel like Itchy and Scratchy, first of all, there's very little likelihood that we're going to be getting a 5-inch variety of these two characters, but I also think that the scale works a little bit better with the 5-inch. You'll see in a second. First though, onto Itchy. He's actually only about 2 inches in height, translating though to a figure that's about 5 centimeters tall. Then to Scratchy obviously is the taller of the two. He's actually 2.5 inches in height, or about 6.5 centimeters tall. I think when you bring in a character like Krusty the Clown, Itchy and Scratchy's size makes a whole lot more sense. Not that the company is probably planning to do a 5-inch version of Itchy or Scratchy for that matter, but funny though enough that we bring in Krusty the Clown, because Krusty the Clown is also released in a 2.5-inch scale, which I think is about the same size as their 2.5-inch Homer Simpson. Just again to give you guys a comparison size. I feel like in a case like this, Itchy and Scratchy should have either been sold as a 2-pack to go along with this size class. Because again, I don't think anybody that's collecting, well, let's just bring in the Bart, for example. I think if you're collecting this size of Simpsons, then why would you get then this Itchy and Scratchy to be displayed with this size? Bringing in other characters also as well. Here's the larger version of Homer Simpson. Here's also Bart Simpson. If I can actually get him to stand. Just recently, we also had a look at Lisa Simpson. Again, she's got a bit of a balancing issue just because, again, her head is so large. At least I don't have her saxophone in her hand this time. And here's also what the figures look like with Bartman. Sold separately, the figures each come included with their own separate accessories. Itchy, for example, comes included with a club. The club looks okay, other than being a really long drumstick. I have noticed, though, in both the cases of this and the mallet, they're using pretty soft plastic. But good luck actually getting either character hold these. Scratchy actually has a better job of holding his accessory than Itchy. Sure, fine enough, it goes into his hand, but then the moment you raise his arm up, Itchy's never going to be able to stand on his own. The only way, really, I was able to pull this off is just to bring the club down a bit and actually just use that as sort of a way to rest him against the shelf or wherever you plan to display this guy. The funny thing also about these characters, if you look at the bottoms of their feet, they tease these unnecessarily sized peg holes on the bottoms of their feet. When you get a hole this small, I mean, it has to go with a specific stand. And yet for Jakks not to include a display stand, and for a character that really does need one, I just feel like why would they have even included the pegs on the bottom of peg holes on the bottoms of their feet in the first place? So other than really one issue that he has properly standing with his club, I will say, though, that Itchy does look really quite good. He's my favorite, I would say, of the two figures. But again, like I probably would have just sold this set together and marketed them more as the 5-inch size because, again, they make more sense that way. I do like the coloring that they chose here for Itchy. I would have probably brought in the Super 7 releases, but of course those deep cut characters that they had to go with, we got ourselves a robot Itchy and a robot Scratchy. And then just salt on the wound, they threw in Poochie in there as well. Did anybody even ask for a Poochie? But again, like the detailing done here is really nice. They've printed in the belly fur there that he has on the front. These shirts, it's kind of more of a lighter pink. It doesn't seem like it's quite the same pink that they have for the sleeves here, but he has some decent levels of posability. I mean, for Itchy alone, his head does rotate back and forth. His arms only swivel back and forth this way, but you can also hinge them out. He has no articulation here for the hand, nor does he have anything here for the waist. And what's interesting, though, about Itchy and Scratchy is that they have articulation here for their legs, but when you move one leg, it also connects the other as well. So you hinge them together. And unfortunately, like what you're seeing right now is to the extent of really what they're actually doing. Scratchy between the two actually bends a little bit better. I mean, for what little he does, I almost would have even just left the articulation off altogether. I mean, for this as all that you're able to do with the figure, it just seems so silly that they would have even included it in the first place. Oh, and he also does have articulation here on the tail. Swivel back and forth. I mean, not the tail is long enough really that you could balance him against the tail if you want to have him holding the mallet, or hold the club. I like the club. It's impossible for the character to actually hold it. On over now to Scratchy. Scratchy comes included with his mallet. Now the mallet fits into his hand, and again, it's using a very soft plastic. Look at this. You can fit it into his hand, and he actually does a little bit better of a job balancing. It also helps too that his tail is long enough so you can bring the tail down a bit, and he can actually rest against that. The mallet itself doesn't really have much in the way of detail. There's a few little lines that they've suggested in there, but other than that, it's a pretty basic looking mallet. It isn't even also quite the same color as the club. It's a little bit of a different color. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't use the exact same color, because I would imagine, though, I mean, tooling these molds would have not just been easier just to use the exact same coloring of plastic. Anyways, what do I know about making figures? Looking, though, at Scratchy. Scratchy, again, is a nice detailed little figure. Even though, again, like, he's smaller, I mean, he doesn't make any sense at all to be displayed with, say, the likes of, well, let's bring in Bart Simpson, for example. I mean, look at the Bart Simpson and then look at the size of Scratchy. Would you, as a collector, ever decide to display this guy with this guy here? Of course you wouldn't. You have common sense. I shouldn't say that. The nose is painted well. As you can see, he's also got the little hanging out tongue that Scratchy has in the cartoon, and a little hanging teeth that he has also there as well. Pupils, again, painted well. A little furry on the front of his tummy, painted nicely on the gloves. I mean, there's not really much in the way of paint that they've put onto these figures, but what they have it done well. Again, on the articulation front, the figure does have a rotation in the head, so you can rotate it all the way around. The arms, again, rotate all the way around as well, hinging in the shoulders. Now, again, when you're looking at Scratchy, unlike Itchy, Scratchy can actually bend his legs a lot better. I mean, really, what would you be able to do with that extent of bend? It's not like he'd be able to sit down or anything like that. I guess you probably could move the tail up. Maybe he could just lean down like this. Does that make any sense? Probably not. And still, again, like, he's got these weird-looking holes on the bottoms of his feet. If you're going to make an obscure size like this, at least include a display stand, because, like, right now, you're just teasing us. You're just teasing us, Jakks. Don't do that. But, like, collectively, I will say, like, these are nice little figures. These were ones that were on my radar for a while, and it always seemed to be the case that I always found Scratchy, but I could never find Itchy. Or it was always the other way around. I found an Itchy once, but I never found a Scratchy. I probably should have just picked him up at that time and then gone looking for Scratchy a little bit later. But what ended up happening, though, was I was on Facebook group and I was buying something from a seller, and I noticed that he also had an Itchy and a Scratchy. So I jumped for the chance, and he ended up giving me a deal. I think he was asking for like $35 for both. I think I got marked down just a little bit under that. But I'm glad to finally now have an Itchy and Scratchy to be displayed with Krusty the Clown. Because again, like, I feel the size is makes a lot more sense. Bring these guys a little bit more in the front here. Will we be getting a 5-inch scale Itchy and Scratchy? I don't think so. I think basically once Jakks Pacific has now done an Itchy and Scratchy of this size, that's probably where they're going to be leaving these two characters. Again, bringing the others. There's Bart Simpson, there's Homer, and here's also Lisa. I wonder if we are going to be getting ourselves a Poochie. Now, I know there are some people that still love the 2.5-inch scale size class, because also they work really well with, like, the backgrounds. Homer, for example, I haven't even picked that one up. I'm kind of still on the fence as to whether I want to grab it. The Simpsons home also comes included with a Homer. It's good, certainly, for people that don't have a whole lot of size to work with, a lot of space to work with. Why are we getting Lisa? There we go. Put Bart right in the middle. Some people actually still prefer to get the 2.5-inch scale because, again, like, if you don't have a whole lot of space to work with, this size class works a whole lot better. It's not like the details are skimped just because the size is a little bit smaller. I mean, this 2.5-inch scale worked just as well as the 5-inch, but the 5-inch obviously benefit from a little bit more posability. Itchy and Scratchy don't have as much. I mean, they have kind of with the same levels of posability as these two guys here. But I mean, for a cat and a cartoon cat and a cartoon mouse, what kind of articulation would you really need with them in the first place? This same wave, by the way, that featured Itchy and Scratchy also had Krusty the Clown, a partially winking Bart with Slingshot, and a Sideshow Bob. I'm still tempted to get that Sideshow Bob. I think I'm going to wait, though, a little bit just to hope that Jakks Pacific eventually releases a 5-inch Bob. Even though the Sideshow Bob here for the 2.5-inch scale is actually him in his prison outfit, that might very well be exclusive to this size class only. Speaking again of this size class, it's again really weird, though, that they chose Itchy and Scratchy to be part of a 2.5-inch scale instead of simply just packing the two together and marketing them as part of the 5-inch size. Because I think for the price, you could easily have put the two together and sold them for around that same price as what they were already asking for the 5-inch scale Simpsons figures. Accessory-wise, they come included, of course, with their club and their mallet. Itchy is the one that has the harder time to hold the club. There's really nothing to help him balance it, so you're always probably going to have the figure displayed with the club resting on the ground. Itchy, on the other hand, or Scratchy, on the other hand, Scratchy the cat, has an easier job to hold the mallet in his hand. Both figures do possess the same levels of posability, which again is surprising for what the 2.5-inch scale is anyways, that they still managed to put in a hinge in their shoulders. So it's not just a case that they're 5-point articulated figures. It seems, again, like unnecessary that they included the hinge in the lowers of their legs. Just because, again, like Scratchy, for example, you can have him in a seated position, but it's not a completely flat seat. So he's going to be slipping off whatever he's sitting down on. And then, of course, you've got yourself Itchy. Itchy can't even sit at all. So why do you even why even take the time to put the hinge there in the first place? Still, though, in the end, while I'm probably not planning to pick up any of the other figures of the 2.5-inch scale, I think I've kind of really settled down just collecting the 5-inch. Itchy and Scratchy was the only 2.5-inch that I could see myself still collecting. Maybe what they could always do is release also some size class figures like of the 2.5-inch, where it could be like a Gabbo, for example, or even a Poochie. I would welcome a Poochie of this size. I don't think having a Poochie the same size as the rest of the Simpsons Ultimates made any sense. Looking in your direction, Super 7. What do you guys, though, think of Itchy and Scratchy? Let me know down below in the comment section. Do you guys also feel like this set should have been sold together and marketed as a 5-inch, not as the 2.5-inch? If you guys did enjoy this video also, you can do it a solid by throwing a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. Hit that subscribe, yeah. Turn on the bell, sure. Come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.